Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. This is Annika Jackson here with Robert Poole as my guest today on Your Brand Amplified. Robert, I'm really excited. I think that the topics that you have brought to the episode today about being an operator versus an owner, where we live, cold calling, these are all things that a lot of people get tripped up in entrepreneurship. And these are pain points that we all suffer from, and also things that people don't feel comfortable doing. So, Robert, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Annika.
Yeah. So your company is Total Business Results. Before we get into that journey, will you please tell us how you got into entrepreneurship and into realizing that there are things that you knew how to do really well that could help other people in their businesses?
Yes, absolutely. Well, my background was an Army officer for a couple of years. I went to West Point, and then when I got out, I got into different types of sales because I knew I wanted to get into business. And so I did a variety of different types of sales jobs, everything from commercial real estate to corporate recruiting. I was a financial consultant for Merrill Lynch for a short period of time. And then right around 2000, 2001, with a business partner of mine, and we founded a company, Total Business Results. Ooh. And originally it was exclusively focused on B2B cold calling, appointment setting, lead generation. And we grew it from nothing into a multi-million-dollar company, 20 something years later. And we've expanded the last 4 or 5 years to do other things that to support our clients, business coaching and, social media management, things like that. But the core of the business has always been that B2B cold calling. So it's one of those topics that sometimes people, cold calling is like a bad word, and understandably, it's right up there with, they have those people's fears thing where it's like public speaking is number 1 and death is number 2. Well, this is somewhere in that top 5 probably. But,
oh my gosh, absolutely. Because you hear about anything that has sales in it, people are afraid of. But it's something that clearly you naturally gravitated towards. Was there something in you as a child where you loved talking to people, loved convincing them of things, knew that you wanted to move into that direction?
It's funny because absolutely not. People laugh because I'm an introvert, really. I'm not your typical outgoing, happy-go-lucky, sales personality that people have that perception of what sales is about. So I had to learn. I got into it more about a necessity because I wanted to learn business, and I knew that what drives business is sales. And, I was pretty, as a young man, pretty driven. So I figured, well, I've got to figure this out. I got to learn how to do this. And I still believe that to this day, that sales is really a skill. There are no real born salespeople. What we think of born salespeople are the outgoing, storytelling types. And it's easier for them because they have some natural tendencies that are helpful. But it's certainly a skill that all of us can learn. And I don't want to go on a long rant about sales, but, we all sell every day. We just don't realize it. Because sales is about influencing, our friends, our loved ones, the people that we run into on a daily basis. So we all know how to do it. We just don't realize it, and we don't do it on demand because we don't think about it, but yeah, it's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah. I think people say the same thing about public speaking. We are actually using that skill set every day. If you're at the grocery store, if you're talking to anybody, anytime, picking up the phone for somebody trying to sell you something, you are public speaking. So I love that you also use that for sales, that we are actually selling, because we have to convince people, whether it's people that know, like, and trust us already as friends, believe what we're going to say, or a stranger, to understand what we have that will make things better in their lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just think about something as simple as every one of us has told a friend, about, wow, I just saw this great movie. And that whole conversation, you're persuading them to go see this movie. Yeah. And so you're selling them on it. You just don't think of it in those terms. And that's all sales really is. So yeah, that's interesting. So, but yeah, you're right. Public speaking is the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and I've also heard that introverts are actually better at sales and a few things because you're listening, right? So you're listening to what somebody else is actually saying, so you can kind of hear what they want. So I don't know if you think that's true or not, but...
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think just as much as I mentioned, that what we think of as natural born salespeople, that what they really bring to it is that storytelling ability that's natural to them. But I think, just like you said, more introverts, because they tend to be good listeners and listen less than they talk. That's another important part of sales. So both an introvert and an extrovert can naturally do well at sales because they both bring a different type of skill set that's kind of natural to them. So yeah, absolutely. There's even a book, I think it's actually called Sales for Introverts or something like that, So yeah, you're right though.
So how has cold calling changed since you started your business?
In some ways it's changed dramatically, but in others not so much. It's still the same base, activity. Of course, when I'm talking about cold calling, we're talking about B2B, not the old days in the 90s, and 80s when people were getting calls at the dinner table at home, so to speak.
Oh, yes.
Anything these days that a consumer gets called, you probably want to hang up because it's most likely a scam, So we're talking about businesses. But yeah, so it's certainly changed I think in how it's used. In the past, you could, if you think about it, like in the 90s, again, there was no social media, no websites, no internet really in use in business. That didn't take off until the 2000s. So you really had cold calling and you had things like mailers. So cold calling maybe would initiate leads, get things going, but then the support system, the lead follow-up, and the things that go with it have changed. So the things that complement cold calling that are important for it, now it's electronic. Now it is social media. Now it is email, things like that. Whereas in the past, it was, pretty much mailers and the physical things. And so it's changed in what supports it. Of course, it's changed in, its perception in society, I think. People still hold on to that a little bit, that old sort of residential model, so there's some natural hesitation. But I think in the business world, people actually, because we're so disconnected and we're so, stuck online doing, social media and that stuff, we lose a little bit of that personal touch. So it actually is a little bit better from that standpoint because people are more receptive to talking to a person. Some people, if you think about it, sometimes you'll call a big company and nowadays the AI and the menu and everything is, how can I help you? And say what you want and all this kind of stuff. And you get buried in these menus when most of us just get somebody on the phone, representatively, whatever we say, because we want to talk to somebody. So it's actually, in that sense, it's a little bit easier because you do get a better reception to a human being talking to you versus just, some sort of automated thing. So, and of course, the technology has changed. When I was first cold calling, I remember I was doing residential cold calling for about a year. I did real estate. And because dialers were just coming out with large call centers at the time, of course, the technology just wasn't there for, small operators and independents. So it was just manually dialing. And I had a real estate trainer that taught me how to use two phones and two phone lines and dial at the same time, and got some wacky stories with that one. But, that was the best you could do versus these days, of course, everyone has access to, an automated system that can make those dials for you. And there's some things that change, but when it comes down to it, it's just like marketing. The fundamentals don't really change over time. Human psychology doesn't change. It's the tools that we use to get there, kind of change. So long answer, but that's what you meant.
Yeah, I love that. And I think about a couple of things that you said. One is my first job was cold calling people from the phone book.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think 1990 for a carpet cleaning business in Topeka, Kansas, and being one of those annoying people who's calling while you're at the dinner table.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with that. And I think because I was so young, I think I was 15, it was like the only job I could get.
Yeah.
So I think I just didn't have any fear. I'm like, I don't know these people. I'm just, take a page in the phone book and dial and see if we can get anybody to take the service. So that was business to consumer, not business to business, obviously. And then I know that for the dialing systems now, everybody uses them, right? Whether it is any kind of telemarketer, whether it's political or your credit card company or what have you. But I'd love to hear, because you teased a little bit, I'd love to hear the stories about the days when you were having to dial two phones, pick them up. So you said you had some funny stories about that time.
Yeah, well, one in particular, I was just thinking about the other day because somebody asked me about it. As I said, would have two phones, two phone lines side by side. And this is all from a real estate trainer, Mike Ferry, who I think his son has taken over his company now. And so you would have a headset that was split. So you'd have, headset either side with two microphones, of course, one connected to each phone. And so the idea was, and of course we had lists printed out. So you literally got like a ruler or something to keep your place on the, the list. And this is again calling residences. Mm-hmm. So the idea would be you start calling with the right hand start dialing with the right hand, phone would start ringing, and then you start dialing with the left hand on this side. And so the phone is ringing. At that time, the rule was if it rings 4 times, you hang up, because that was the AT&T, the Ma Bell, whoever found out in studies that the average time somebody would pick up the phone would be 4 rings. So you knew that you didn't have to wait longer than that. If they didn't pick up by the 4th ring, very unlikely they were going to pick up from there. So So you let it start ringing 4 times while you're dialing this one. And then maybe you drop that call and you continue on this one, you start dialing again. And so you're doing this back and forth thing. And then if somebody picks up on, the line on the right, you drop the one on the left. And, and so it's this back and forth thing. And, as you can imagine, so you're doing this, it's pretty intense work. I think I remember I could do about 120 dials, 130 dials an hour, manually that way. And I mean, you're only getting actually through to maybe, at that time, it was maybe 20, 25% of the residences. But one day I was a realtor, so I was calling for, to try to pitch people on letting me set up an appointment to come list their house. And my list, I was going down, calling, and I got through to a lady and started talking to her. And she said, "Hey, great. Yeah, I am interested in possibly selling my house. We set up an appointment for, it was Thursday at 3 or something. And great. Okay, well, I'll see you then." I hung up and then right back on it, started dialing again, which is one of the keys to cold calling, by the way. When you set an appointment, best time to set another appointment is right then. So don't stop and take a break. So I started dialing the next number, and I think I lost my place on the sheet somehow. And so I went to the person, I think it was above her or 2 above her, called them, nothing. And then I called her again, and she picked up. I started going through my spiel because I didn't recognize her voice because she just said hello or whatever. And then she said, "Okay, yeah, you can come out. Why don't you come out, on Friday or whatever, And so I got to the very end of the call before I realized that this is the same person I just set an appointment with the day before. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if she was messing with me or she just was like, she just didn't care, but whatever it was, she agreed to a second appointment. And it's one of those deer in the headlights moments when you get that, you get the hair on the back of your neck goes up and you realize, I'm in trouble. But I kind of so sheepishly got off the call, but and I don't think I did list her house now that I think about it. So I somehow lost my place on that list, so that was one of the stranger things that have happened over the years. But, you talk to enough people and you find all kinds of crazy stuff, so.
Yeah. And hopefully technology makes that a little bit easier because you don't have to think about where your place is in line, right?
Exactly. That can't happen with modern technology, that's for sure.
So what are some things that people need to be aware of? First of all, of cold calling as a strategy. Is it still a successful strategy in this day and age? And what do you need to prep before you start cold calling? Because I think a lot of people who are listening are business to business.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And the answer is yes, it definitely still works in a B2B scenario, but it does depend on what you're selling, what your company does. So it's going to depend on the industry you're in, the types of clients you have. I would say just in general, it works better for higher ticket items. If you're selling a $27 widget, you're probably not going to get, enough sales to justify that. And but if you're selling a $100,000 CRM system, then it certainly makes sense. So if you've got the right scenario, the right types of clients, and you've got enough of them, there's not just, 200, possible prospects nationwide. If you got a sizable list, in other words, then it certainly works well. We do, for instance, we do a lot in the business brokerage and M&A industry. Okay. And, we had a client the other day that sold a business that they got a lead from that they made over $500,000 on the commission from our sales. So, they could pay for our service for, 20 years or something. So again, the right scenario, it works very well. As far as some tips, I guess the biggest thing I think, and I think people get where I'm coming from on this, is protecting your brain from negativity, because, everybody knows, you're going to call some people who are not nice. It's just the nature of, hey, especially in today's society, there's a lot of tension, but the phone is no different. You talk to enough people, you're going to find some interesting personalities, we'll say it that way. So the best thing to do is sort of protect your brain, and so one of the things I always recommend is, let's say you're going to do some cold calling. You say, I'm going to do an hour a day or 3 hours, whatever it may be. Do that first thing in the morning. And when you do it, come into your office or at home or wherever, you don't check your email, don't look at your social media, don't check, the latest headlines and news, don't check your voicemail, don't check anything that potentially could have some kind of negativity to it, because you need to be in the best mood possible to start off with, that positive energy. If you don't have that, and you read about what's going on in the world, or some client emails you complaining about something, it's like you're already, taking yourself down because you need that extra energy. So that's one of the biggest tips, I think, that really helped me. And then the other thing I would really focus on, and that's always helped me, if we believe in what we're selling, what we're calling about, we have to think about it in the perspective of if there's 100 people in our list, there is likely somebody in there that really needs what we're offering. So if we're offering some sort of technology solution, let's say, some CRM system that's really going to help somebody organize and improve their relationships with their clients, somebody really needs that. And you think about current customers and how happy they might be. And so if we don't wade through all the other people that don't need it, the people that, are on that list somewhere, we are in a sense kind of leaving that person who needs it hanging. And so we've got to have a responsibility. We've got to be strong enough personally to make sure we sacrifice our own ego, get through the calls to find that person because they're waiting for us. So it's a matter of getting through that list to find the person so that we can serve them and help them the way that we're supposed to be doing. So if we remind ourselves of that mentality, it actually really helps. So I really recommend that.
I love that approach because it makes me feel like, okay, I could go cold call today.
Yeah. It is all mental, like a lot of things in life,
Well, you talked about a few industries that you work with. Do you have a few verticals or industries that you work with more than others, or do you have an ideal customer persona for businesses that you like to work with?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, business brokers, mergers and acquisition, that industry. Also, we do a lot in the commercial insurance industry. And our third biggest is managed IT firms. They're typically smaller firms for all three of those categories. So I would say, probably less than 20 employees. Sometimes just business brokers in particular, a lot of times are sole practitioners or very small offices, but they're kind of unique in that sense. But of course, for us, it's all business to business, type of stuff. But, those are the big industries. We do have other smaller things, commercial real estate, things as crazy as it sounds, like sign companies that make signage for companies. Again, it really depends on what they're selling, but that's kind of the general profile. And of course, because of what we do, there's no real geographic limitation. We only call on the continental U.S. just because it's, too complicated for us to call overseas. And we played with Canada at a time, but they've got different laws and different business stuff. So it got a little confusing. So we just focus on the continental U.S. right now.
Yeah. Are you ready to take your brand to new heights? Join the Brand Amplifier for Entrepreneurs program. Learn how to build, elevate, and amplify your brand with a comprehensive 10-module course. Learn more about it and other ways to implement our strategies at fullcapacitymarketing.com. Click on EFCM Learning Hub for more information. Can't wait to help you amplify your brand. Well, I'd love to hear, because that's a really great point. And I have seen a lot of companies come out saying, we have virtual assistants who could be appointment setters or can cold call or cold email on LinkedIn. And has that affected your business at all?
No, again, I think, we use all US-based callers for a reason, because we believe that the regions of the country, I hate to say it, but don't always have the best perception of each other. If you have somebody from Alabama or the Deep South with that accent calling New York City, it's not going to go well.
Right.
Let's be real. People from New York City probably think those hillbillies down in Alabama, are because they speak slower, they're a bunch of dummies. And the opposite, people from the South probably think those New Yorkers are real jerks because they are gruff and they speak fast. So the point is, we try to match regional accents and culture to, so we try to avoid doing things like that. So it's a little different, but we also, again, it's a complementary type of service. So it doesn't mean that you can't use, and you should use, other marketing with it, to complement it. It's part of a larger marketing strategy, not just one aspect that you depend solely on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I know I've read a lot of statistics. It takes 5 to 12 touch points to get somebody to convert to a sale. So, and you did talk about how you've added other services. So would somebody be able to come with you, say, hey, here's what my product is, and then you'd be able to help them create a plan that might involve, you said social media, it might involve the cold calling system, and it might involve a few other things that you might do, or that you might say, either have an internal person or another firm work on this aspect of it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we kind of made a change back in, this is probably about 6 years ago. I did mention when my business partner passed away in 2017, and we started shifting what we were doing as a company, because we realized that we had been solely focused on this one particular technique, and our clients, a lot of them would come to us, and we were giving basically free advice and consulting and helping them with different areas of their business, which we're happy to do. But we realized, let's say this person, they need some help in social media. They don't even have a Facebook page, or, they're not even on LinkedIn, whatever. And we would, in the past, we would just say, well, you should find somebody to do that, Sometimes we would refer them out to people, but so we realized that there were a lot of other things that our clients needed. So we started offering some of these ancillary services, like doing, the social media management. And we'd always done like email follow-up that was that was integrated into our cold calling. So that wasn't really a separate thing, but because we'd used that from day one back in the early 2000s. And so we also started getting into a formalized coaching group and individual, which is really what I do these days mostly. And then we also started working on educational stuff. We do small events, from time to time, challenges and things like that are, marketing events. And so, small things like website design, that's not our main focus, but we offer all those services. And, basically we look at what a client needs. And if it's simple stuff, then we can help them with. If it's a very complex type of project, then we've got partners that will work with them, to make sure they get the best results. But that's our number one thing, is to focus on the client and what's going to benefit their business the most, and kind of take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I have questions about that a little bit more, but I want to acknowledge that I'm so sorry that your business partner passed away.
Oh, thank you.
And I know that also created a pivot with how you looked at the business and moving from, which is another topic I wanted to discuss today, from operator to really ownership. And how do you define operator versus owner? And how did you realize that you were living in one space and needed to move to the other?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that, most of us get into business as in entrepreneurship because we think, I want to be my own boss. I want to have, unlimited freedom and unlimited, potential income, all that good stuff. And usually a year or two later, it's kind of, how's that working for you? You're working 80 hours a week and getting paid less. But yeah, it's a lot of times in life, we find that there's those inflection points, those things that happen that completely change the direction you're going. As I mentioned, for many years, I had a great business partner. Most business partnerships, quite frankly, don't turn out well usually,
Right.
But I was very fortunate. We complemented ourselves, different personalities, different skill sets, everything. So it really worked out well. But, 2017, I think it was the July 5th, so it was right after the 4th of July. I came to work one day and he didn't. And it turned out he had a heart attack the night before. But he had always been very focused on the clients, and that was what he had with the company. And I was more interested in the sales side of it, the numbers, operations, the building of the team, all those types of things. And it's a little embarrassing, but I don't think I had the same respect for our clients that he did. And he always pushed me on that. I was always kind of like, okay, yeah, whatever. Let's just make it happen. Let's get the results and, they'll be fine. But I realized I had taken a vacation the week before, and I realized, I'm really missing the boat here. He's been right all these years that I'm focused on the wrong thing. I'm not focused on our clients' needs. And I was actually planning on having a little, discussion with him, got back and saying, hey, I apologize. I've been wrong, and unfortunately, I never got to have that conversation. But the reason I bring that up is because that was a pivot point for me, and maybe realized that where our focus was as a company, it wasn't in the right direction. It wasn't purely on what are our clients' needs. And so we started changing our company. And during that process, I found that all of a sudden I didn't have the business partner who was handling that side of the business. I couldn't handle it all, basically. In the past, I would go on vacation for 2 weeks. When I got married, I went on like a honeymoon for almost a month. And he handled my stuff. I handled his. It was kind of worked out great. Plenty of freedom. But I realized all of a sudden I'm stuck. I can't even take a day off. I'm going to work at 4 a.m. until there at 8 p.m, and that type of thing. And I said, I've got to make some changes here. I've got to change the type of company we are. And more importantly, I've got to change, well, maybe not more importantly, but for me personally, I've got to change my role in the company, because I can't, I had young children, and it's like, I can't live like this for the next, 30, 40 years. So I realized I was an operator and not an owner. And you asked how I define that. And I think the litmus test, I always think the best way to put it is, if you leave tomorrow from your business, say goodbye to everybody, fly to Tahiti for a month, don't take your phone, don't take your computer, you're not allowed to contact the office. When you get back, is your business still there, for one? And more importantly, is it growing? Is it thrived when you've left? And if not, you're probably still in that operator mode, which, nothing wrong with that, but really, like, what I realized, that I was a basically an employee who happened to own 100% of the stock in the company. I wasn't really, an owner. I was still in operator mode. And so I spent a couple of years trying to figure that out, how to design my company to function without me, because it was, I found going through, because of the partnership dissolution and everything, I found that financially the company wasn't worth even close to what it was when there were two of us. That cut the value by 2/3. So things like that. And I've been able to get back sort of my freedom in life by learning, but it was a little trial by fire, in a good way. So there's just like a lot of bad things happen in life, but there's usually a silver lining and a lot of good things that come out of it in the long run. So if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that is a place, like you said, most people go into entrepreneurship because they think, oh, I'm going to have freedom. I might work more, but I'm going to work on my own schedule. But there's also the thing, and this book has been coming up a lot in the past few interviews I've done, the E-Myth Revisited, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which talks about you might really love baking. You might be really good at that. But are you good at actually turning it into a business and running the business side? And so that's going kind of the opposite a little bit. It's going into like knowing how to do the operations and live in that space. But you also have to know how to be the creative mind, right? And the big thinker and the strategist to figure out how you're going to communicate to clients, how you're going to continue growing the business and find and hire the right people, right? To help with the other aspects.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that, because the E-Myth was probably one of the biggest impacts on me as a business owner, as a young man, entrepreneur. And, when I read it 25 plus years ago, the original one, but it's absolutely true. We tend to also get into business because we're good at something. And we kind of fell into it. I was good at cold calling, but it was a longer story, but we kind of fell into it. It wasn't by design, which I guess that does happen too. But I think we think that it's the same thing, that we're good at something. And so therefore that translates into a business.
Right.
When business ownership is a skill set in itself, they're separate. The technical skills that we have are different from the skills that you need to run a business and to turn it into a sellable asset. And that was part of the realization for me. I think that's one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, is how do we, because it's not taught a lot other than, you see the E-Myth talks about it, but it's not something that's emphasized a lot of places. In how do you learn those skills as a business owner to become a true owner and not just the technician, the operator, like you mentioned,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And how was that transition for you? And I'm sure, like you said, there aren't mistakes. There are just lessons that we learn to make us better as we go on our journeys.
That's right.
How long did it take you to shift your mindset and shift into the owner role?
I was thinking about it, and I think probably it would have been mid 2019. So I'd be about 2 years for me. And again, this was trial and error a lot, and so people ask me that question a lot. Well, how long is this going to take me to make this transition? And I always say, well, like a good lawyer, the answer is, it depends. But it depends on things like, is your business an ocean liner or a speedboat? If it's just you starting out, it's a lot easier to make changes than, if you've got 10, 20, 100 employees, it's a bigger ship to steer. And it does depend a lot on us and our personality and how much we personally are willing to change, because, a lot of us are type A personalities. We just want to go, go, go and get things done, which is, you need that to get the business to grow. But we also have a hard time stepping back from it, releasing things, delegating things, trusting the team that we built. It's always easier to say, well, I can do it faster myself, so I'll just do it, as a small example. And, I think we're all guilty of that, But so it's a lot of it is about changing us, changing our mentality, changing what we focus on, and changing how we see ourselves. Do we see ourselves as, am I that baker or am I that owner? There's a difference. And so when you start to view yourself as an owner, it's different. It's a different mentality. And that can take time. And it's, but I think it's about motivation. In my case, I was very motivated because I knew what freedom was like, so to speak. And then it was like that taken away from me. And so I was really motivated to make a change, Unfortunately, it took, longer than, if I know what I know today, obviously I could have done a lot faster, but, it was a lot of trial and error. But so it really starts like a lot of things in life up here, in the noggin and how we view ourselves, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And how do you market your own business?
We still use cold calling as a big portion of that. And because of the types of clients we have and for all the reasons we talked about, I do a lot of outreach like these shows, or social media. I do a lot of YouTube videos now and things like that. So we kind of do a mix of old school and newer digital marketing work. And that's why I always recommend, it's like everybody will tell you that their marketing technique, works for your business. If they're selling Facebook ads, it's like, you got to do Facebook ads because that's the best thing ever. Well, the truth is that a lot of marketing techniques won't work for your business. So you got to find the ones that do work, that make sense, that you get the best results from. And we found that a combination of the cold calling and providing good content to our clients and prospects is really what drives our company as far as marketing.
Is there ever a situation where somebody wants to work with you and you have to turn them down? You just don't think that they're the right fit for your philosophy or the way that you do business, or they're not willing to maybe do some of the other things they need to do to complete that sales and that integrated strategy cycle?
That is a great question. I've never been asked that before, but it is really good. And the answer is yes. We probably turn down 9 out of 10 people that approach us.
Oh my gosh.
And it's because of that fundamental shift that we made as a company back in, when my business partner passed away. We used to have the attitude, and this was driven by me, unfortunately, I have to admit it, was that, if your money is green, we'll take you,
Right.
And when you're starting out, you kind of have to do that, but we just never shifted out of that mode. And we found that we had the wrong type of clients, the people that, they didn't share our values. Our service didn't necessarily make sense for them. We were just taking their money because they were willing to give it. And, so we had high turnover. So we kind of shifted that, and changed our mentality of the types of clients that we have. And so it goes back to that, who's your perfect client, type of idea that a lot of people talk about, but it is so true. And the difficulty is how do you make that transition if you've already got a lot of clients? And so we spent some time making that transition. But during that period of time, we started becoming very selective in who we wanted to work with. And it's not because, we were, so great and, whatever. It wasn't that kind of arrogance. It was more about, we're not going to be able to do a good enough job for you, because we don't share the same values. They don't understand marketing the way we do. They don't value the same things. We don't think in the long run that this strategy we're offering is going to work for you. It doesn't make them bad people or anything like that. It just means that, our culture doesn't fit, the way they view things. And that's okay. So we've been very selective, but it's also really, I think it's benefited both of our clients because it's a difference, let's face it, most of us have had, that client that we're like dreading calling or, working with, we're like, oh, geez, I got, and so, mentally, we all try to do a good job for them. But let's face it, if you call your favorite client or you call the one that you're not a big fan of, who are you going to work harder for?
Yeah.
So if you have a bunch of clients that you are not real big fans of, it's hard to do a good job for them, you're going to do your job, but it's just different. So that's why it's so important to have a good relationship and have the kind of clients that share your values and are appropriate for your business. So that's why we have kind of changed our mentality on that.
I'm so glad that you said that because it's something I think so many of us do when we start our businesses. Like you said, the money's green, we feel like we have to take everything. And then we start getting a little more selective. And then even clients who might seem like they're the right profile aren't always the right fit. And so I love that you were able to, you already were such a successful business, but then you realized, okay, this isn't exactly what we want to be doing or who we want to be doing it for. So you weren't afraid to make the shift. And I think that's something really important for people to realize is you don't have to get stuck on this hamster wheel. You can make a shift, and you can make a shift that will be more positive for both you and the clients that you retain, because it is hard. I struggle with this as well. Like if I have a project I really don't want to work on, I feel like I just put roadblocks up and then don't get it done. And then maybe you're delayed or maybe you didn't communicate effectively with that client. It creates a lot more difficulty for you than if you're just honest with who you want to work with from the beginning.
Yeah. What really helped me was realizing that it's okay, if we're not the right fit for them. It doesn't mean that they're a bad person or that we're bad people by, turning away their business. Not everybody is going to gel with everybody. We all know that as human beings. And so what we want to do is focus on, how can we serve our clients the best? And the best way we can serve them is to service the right clients, in my opinion,
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about how you're doing a lot of coaching now. You offer these other services. What does the next year, 2 years, 5 years look like for you personally, but then also for your business?
Yeah, we're in an exciting time because we've started making that transition the last few years, as I mentioned. And, one of the things I didn't mention was that shift also really affected me personally, and of course, in a variety of ways. But when I started getting into the sort of consulting and the coaching side of the business, I realized that, wow, I love this impact of working with other business owners. And it was fulfilling, for lack of a better term. You hear that thrown around a lot, that, we got to do what's fulfilling or something, but because I've always been focused on, is it going to make me money? Okay, I'm in. So it's really changed. And so I think the next few years, my personal focus is really to build up and expand the coaching side of the business for, both group coaching, individual. I've got limited time, obviously, but, primarily with that, and be able to do larger events. We've done small online events. So I think we'd like to do some in-person stuff now that we've come out of COVID, because I'm always been a big fan of, I love, Tony Robbins and, self-development type of stuff, So if you haven't ever been to a Tony Robbins event, that's one of those things you got on your bucket list. But so we'd like to do some live events, as a company. And I think for me personally, continuing that growth in that area, because, it also goes back to the best way to learn something is to teach it. And so building those relationships in a coaching environment for me has been very impactful. And I'm just really looking forward to that the next few years, increasing that.
Fantastic. I love that, because then you're really pouring back everything that you've learned in building up this company, all the pivots, all the advice that you can give to business owners so that they can hopefully get past some of the hurdles a little earlier, potentially. Right?
Yeah. No, that's what I always think of it in the sense that what would I tell the Robert of 10 years ago, and how much money would I have saved myself, with all of that, if I'd known some of the dumb things I've done. And so, yeah, it gives you a different perspective in life, certainly.
Fantastic. And if somebody went to your website, would they be able to find out about all of your services, whether they wanted the coaching, the social media, the website, the cold calling, whatever services there are?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to totalbusinessresults.com, there's, the basic information there. Of course, because we're a big believer in the personal side of it, there's not extensive information. We want to talk to you because, again, we want to have that conversation about, what your intents are, your goals are, and, your belief systems and everything. So, and it doesn't really matter the type of service that is, because that's one thing that's changed. Again, in the past, it's like, okay, you want a website? Sure, we'll do it. Where now it's like, well, why do you want a website? What are you trying to get across? What's the goal? It's a conversation versus just a transactional type of thing. So yeah, I would, if you hit the website, feel free to call us and talk to us about the numbers on there. But yeah, that's probably the easiest way.
Okay, fantastic. And I think that you also have a special offer of a strategy session with a link that I'm going to be putting in the show notes. So the first, I think 3 people who listen and ask for the strategy session will be able to get it. Is that correct?
Yes, I figured I had to limit it to 3. Just I know you've got a very successful podcast, so I didn't want to go too far with my time. But yeah, I'd be absolutely thrilled to talk to 3 of your audience. Just do a 30-minute strategy session, primarily based upon that operator to owner transition, and help you evaluate where you are right now in that spectrum, and then give you some ideas and a plan to really start making that shift. So that you can make some definite shifts in the next 90 days and have some, results where you can start to see that freedom coming, So we're happy to talk about that. No obligation. I'm not going to hard sell you or anything like that. Of course, if you're interested in talking further, we can talk about that, but not a hard sell thing at all. So just a service for your listeners. So
thank you. That's really lovely. And I know people will definitely take you up on that offer. And so this is a question that you may not be prepared for, but I want to ask, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, family motto, verse, some words that help you get through the day or that you live by?
What? There's so many of them. I'm a quote person, so my wife always says, you can't remember what happened yesterday, but you got a line from a movie that was 20 years ago. In the context of what we've been talking about, I think probably the single biggest change in my mentality since 2017 that has affected me the most is that what happens to me happens for me. Meaning, regardless of what is going on, these outside events that, on the surface can appear to be a tragedy, a catastrophe, whatever, there really are opportunities and help me grow as a person, because most of the time as human beings, the status quo is what we want. I know it is for me. It's just natural. And so we need to be prodded and pushed into doing things. And so looking at bad things that happen, so to speak, you got to get through that phase of, the sucks and mourn and whatever, that's natural. We're human. But after that, you've got to figure out, okay, what is this going to force me to do? Who is this going to force me to become? And so I would say my favorite phrase is what happens to me happens for me. And I try to remind myself of that particularly when something bad's happening, so.
That is fantastic advice. And definitely something that we all need to internalize. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Robert, this has been really fun conversation. I've loved getting to know you and demystifying something that we usually think of as really scary, right? But I feel like I have a little more confidence going into if I need to do some cold calls, that I'll be able to do it because I'll have you in the back of my head. So thank you again. And thank you to my audience for watching or listening to this episode, whether it's on your favorite podcast channel, on YouTube, on Traverse TV, or 360 Talk Radio for Women. We're trying to be in all the places so that you can find us and enjoy consuming this amazing content from guest experts anywhere that you want to be. And with that, I will be back again in a few days with another amazing expert. And Robert, I appreciate your time so much. TotalBusinessResults.com. I'll have that in the show links as well for everybody to take him up on that strategy offer if you're one of the first 3 callers.
Great. Thank you, Annika.
Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.